Hello fellow orchid lovers, it's Danielle here with a quick video on different methods that I employ in my water culture method to grow my orchids. So as you can see, I don't just have one type, I have several different types of orchids ranging from, your typical hybrid Phalaenopsis, Vandas, Oncidiums, Cattleyas, Dendrobiums, you name it, I have some of them. So I have a pretty extensive collection. And as you know, orchids come from different parts of the world. They have different growing requirements. And so I have done certain things to kind of try to satisfy what their growing needs may be. And someone asked me recently if I could perhaps just demonstrate what it is that I do with the water and with the glass beads and how that benefits the orchid. So what I'd like to do is just start off with, there's three different technically methods of water culture. Water culture is just growing hydroponically. So there's what's called full water culture, there's what's called semi-water culture, and then there's what's called semi-hydro. So full water culture just means that the plant has access to water all week. 7 days of the week it has access to water. Now in my environment that doesn't mean a lot of water, that just means a little bit of water. But I grow upstate New York. Granted, it is a grow room. I do have a somewhat controlled environment, but I still think less is more as far as water is with your orchid. So I try not to make the water levels too high. Typically throughout the winter, I don't use full water culture, I use semi-water culture. So full water culture for me, I'll demonstrate with this Phalaenopsis. This is one of my transitioning Phalaenopsis. This is one of the orchids that I got from Hauserman back, I think in the summer. This is my Secret Smile. And if you'll remember, she dumped all of her roots when we transferred her over to water culture. She had been grown in moss, and I find that orchids that are grown in moss are a little difficult to transfer to a different method. Even if you're going into another organic material, they don't really care for it. So even if you're putting them in bark, they typically dump their roots. So she dumped all her roots, and now as you can see, she is back. She has plenty of nice new roots. But this is an example of full water culture. So as you can see, this orchid is not exposed to a lot of water. There's just the tiniest little bit of water on the bottom of the vase, and her roots are saturated. She does not need more water than this. The stem is nice and dry, so I'm not concerned about that, but she doesn't need a lot of water in order to sustain herself. And as you can see, she is very happy. Her roots are branching, they're chunky, they're awesome. So this is an example of full water culture for me. When I do full water culture, I do not do a high level of water. I do bare minimum, just the tips of the roots in water. Now, when the summer starts to get really hot in here, it can go up into the 80s in this room. She may drink this water quicker. And so I may give her a little bit more every time I water her, just so I don't have to keep watering her every day. But right now, this is the kind of water that I give her. And I water my plants every week. I check on them throughout the week, so I make sure that I'm giving them appropriate water. An example of semi-water culture for me, semi-water culture just means that there is water in the glass for a few days a week, and each environment's different, so you can decide which days of the week it's gonna have water and which days of the week it's not. But typically it's 2 to 3 days with some water in the vase, and then the rest of the week dry. So as you can see, her roots are completely dry. She has not had water. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take her out of the glass because I don't want to water her while I'm filming, because that's how we get water in crowns, and that's how orchids get very sick. So all right, so that's the amount of water I'm gonna put in there. I'm gonna make sure it's correct. So I'm gonna take her and we're gonna put her back in. Okay, and as you can see, her stem is well out of the water. Okay, you can go to the bottom of the stem if you're only gonna keep it in the water for a couple of hours. But if you're gonna keep the orchid in water for more than a couple of hours, it's not a good idea to soak the stem long term. So as you can see, the stem is well above the water. Now, if an orchid has no roots, you can soak the stem to give it hydration, but that's like kind of your last resort. But I do have videos on how you can rescue Phalaenopsis with no roots. So this is what I will do. If I'm gonna do semi-water culture, I give a nice big drink and she sits in this for 2 days. And then all the water gets drained off, and for the next 5 days, she's completely dry. And as you can see, as you saw before I put her in the water, her roots are completely dry. So it's that wet, dry cycle. So full water culture, semi-water culture. And then we have some different types of orchids. So this one right here, I wanted to use this as an example because this is a very thirsty orchid and it's not even that warm in here yet. As you can see, it's very healthy. I got this also last summer. This is Wilsonara Fuego Ideal. This was actually a free plant from Calipana Tropics. They gave this to me free in the box. And you can see her root system is really, really good. A lot of that green that you're seeing is actually algae. It's not that the roots are wet. Technically, she could go for another day or two without water, but for demonstration purposes, I'm just gonna show you what I typically do. So if an Oncidium has really good root system and is a very thirsty plant, I'll give them a fair amount of water. But if it's not, if it only has a few roots and the rhizome is very close to where the roots are, then I don't really give it a lot of water because I don't want to rot the bulbs. So pretending that this orchid doesn't have very good roots, we're just going to put some water in. So that's basically it. I would make sure that the water level is very far away from that rhizome. Now she does have a very good root system and she's a very thirsty plant. And so in the heat of the summer, I will probably double the amount that I put in every week. And within a couple of days, she'll have drank that all up. But for right now, it's not quite the heat of the summer yet. And again, I don't want to create a situation where there's a lot of excess moisture and then mold and rot can set in. And so I always err on the side of less water. Orchids are going to tell you when they're dehydrated. A Phalaenopsis, the leaves are going to start to look leathery and droopy. An Oncidium, typically their pseudobulbs will get really, really wrinkled. You're going to see signs that the orchid is dehydrated, and you can step in and maybe give a little bit more water. Also, if you're paying attention and you typically would give an orchid this much water and you're coming back a day later and it's gone, that's your clue that the orchid needs more water. So if you're paying attention to your collection, you'll be able to see that. Now the other side of the coin is excuse me, my Vandaceous types. I do full water culture with them, but the exception is that I give them a weekly soak as well. So they always have water in the glass, but I also fill up the glass once a week and give them a nice big soak. Because as we all know, Vandas love water. So what I would do is I would fill this up all the way to there and let her sit like that for a couple of hours till her roots all green up and get really, really, really full of water. And then after a couple of hours, I drain the water back down to here. And that's what she sits in for the week. So she is full water culture, but she also gets a nice big drink once a week. And after I give her her nice big drink, usually the algae that's on her roots gets nice and loose and I can clean the algae off. Because I have found my Vandaceous orchids do not like algae. Now, another method that you can use if you have an Oncidium type or really any type of orchid that doesn't have great roots is you can add some type of pebble or glass bead or something to the bottom of your vase so it can provide humidity without actually touching the roots. So like for instance, this orchid does not need to be watered. As you can see, her root system is not drenched, but it's moist. She does not need water. But she's one of the ones that actually sits on the pebbles, so I wanted to pull her so I could show you what I do with her. This is my wildcat. As you can see, her spike is like, whoa. But anyways, and actually this, Yoshi on his recent video showed us Heaven Scent that blooms again. Same suitable, and that's what this Wildcat did. This suitable already bloomed, and the spike died, and then a couple of months later, it put out another spike, and I was like, "But you already bloomed." I've never had that happen before, so yeah, it's interesting. But anyways, so the glass pebbles kind of provide humidity in the glass. So today is Wednesday. I watered this orchid Friday, and as you can see, she's still fine. She's doing great, and it's pretty hot in here. It's almost 80 degrees in here today. So the glass pebbles, as you can see, have water in them, but it's not up to the roots. It's just, you know, below the roots, so there's still that humidity in the glass, but it's not soaking the orchid. So the orchid is not drenched with water. So again, she doesn't need water, but when I do water her, like, usually I water on Fridays. Sometimes, you know, especially in the summer, I'll water also midweek because, they dry out really quick. But it's May, so typically they don't dry out that quickly in May. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll water them again. But when I do water her, I just put the water level just to the top of these beads, and she'll get nice and moist like that, and then the water level will recede, and then for the rest of the week she doesn't get any water. So that's how I use the glass beads to provide a microclimate of humidity also in the vase, so that the roots can stay moist without being too wet, because as you all know, too much moisture leads to rot, and we don't want that. We want to keep them happy so that they put out spikes like that. And then a couple of more uses of these glass beads. Sorry, I got to get up from the floor. I was trying to get you a good angle, and okay, there we go. A couple of more uses of the glass beads is my version of semi-hydroponics. So a lot of people use the leca beads or pebbles or something like that. I use the glass beads. I think for myself personally, I like the way they look. I'm also an overwaterer, so anything that retains moisture like leca is a bad choice for me, simply because I probably will overwater the plant if it has something that retains moisture. In situations like Cattleyas, I use them because Cattleyas, like at least in my environment and my Cattleyas, they do better if they're stabilized in something and they can actually grow into something. And so I gave them the glass beads for that purpose. This is my BLC Mary's Glory. She blooms every year. She's so pretty and she smells so nice. Just really pretty orchid. Sorry, distracted. Pretty blooms, distracted. But as you can see, she's potted in these glass beads. And what I do with her once a week is and sometimes in the summer I will do it twice a week, or I'll leave a little bit of a reservoir, and I'll show you what I mean. I water them once a week, and the way that I do that is I just take my water and I pour it until it's full, and then I leave it like that for a couple of hours. So all of her root system gets really, really hydrated. Just soaks up as much water as possible, and then after a couple of hours, I pull the inside pot out, which has holes in it, and I drain all the water off. This is especially true of the winter. I do not leave my Cattleyas wet in the winter. In the summer, however, I have a tendency to leave just a touch of water on the very bottom, because by 2 days later it'll be gone, because the orchid's very thirsty because they're doing a lot of growing and it's hot. But during the winter, all that water gets drained off. So I can try to show you what that looks like. Just trying to see if I have something to drain the water into. Probably not. I'm gonna put you down for a second, because it'll be so much easier to grab something to drain it into without taking you with me, because you won't get dizzy. All right, so let's see if I can do this. So I have a little bowl here. Basically what you do, I do it in a sink obviously, is you just pull this, I say basically, like it's an easy thing. Let's see. So you just take this and you pull it out, And you see how that water just comes right out? I hope you can see how that water just comes right out. And now she's dry. And her roots are nice and saturated, but she doesn't have any more standing water in the pot. I hope you guys saw that. If you didn't, I'm sorry, but you get the general idea. And that's how I water my Callias. And that's how this is one of my semi-hydro methods. The other one includes microfiber. And I've showed you guys this recently, actually. I did a repot on my zygopetalums, and I showed you that for orchids like zygopetalums, pathiopetalums, which is what I meant to say in the first place, pathiopetalums, my vanilla, I like to keep their roots a little bit more moist, especially pathiopetalums. They don't really like dryness per se. So I always like to keep some humidity in the glass, but I also don't want to keep the roots too wet, because again, too wet equals rot. So how do we keep humidity in the glass without there being water present? Well, the microfiber holds the humidity for me. So I weave the microfiber up through the roots and through the glass beads, and that provides that circle of humidity. So I drained off the water for this orchid so that you could see how much water I actually give them. So as you can see, there is a little bit of water on the very bottom, but usually I give her a little more water than that. So I will try to show you on film without getting any in the orchid itself. So I like to fill it just until it touches the bottom of the root system. So you see how that water is just at the bottom of the root system, the water level right there. So these microfiber strips, they absorb the water and they bring it all the way up to the top. And then the bottom of the roots have a constant, steady source of water. So the environment stays damp, but not too damp. I don't do that with my Cattleyas because again, they need that dry part of their wet-dry cycle. Pathiopetalums, not so much. Again, they don't want it too wet, but they don't want it dry either. So that's kind of a way that I found to do a happy medium. So I hope that was informative, and it showed you just a little bit of the different methods that I use, why I use the glass beads, how I use the glass beads, what the difference is between semi-water culture, full water culture, and semi-hydro. If you have any questions, certainly let me know. I've been getting a lot of really good questions lately, and so I am trying to make videos on those questions. I do have quite a bit going on, so sometimes those videos are a little bit delayed, and I apologize for that, but I really appreciate the questions, and I will try to make a video where I at least mention your question. It may not be an entire video, but I will at least mention your question and try to answer it for you. I know I have a few more things. Some people asked to see certain orchids, so I'm going to do like a grow room update because as you can see, there's quite a bit going on in here. So I'm gonna try to do that and also include those few orchids that people asked me to show. So I hope you guys are all having a great day, and I will talk to you all next time.